And the analysis of Brooks and Marcus, that is New York Times columnist David Brooks and Washington Post columnist Ruth Marcus, filling in for Mark Shields. It's good to have you both with us.
Thanks.
And what is more exciting to talk about than the Congressional Budget Office? So this week, there was a sobering report from the Congressional Budget Office, David, in which they warned the country could land in another recession if Congress does a couple things. Doesn't let these Bush-era tax cuts expire, and if there are serious cuts made in government spending. And there are members of Congress who want both of these things to happen. So what do people think is really going to happen there?
Chaos, decline, apocalypse. It's all going to happen.
Have a nice weekend.
Yeah, right. The weekend will be fine. It's only going to happen in December. It'll be after the election, and all these things come due, tax cuts, spending, all these automatic things start happening. Right. And so we hand this incredibly knotty problem onto a Congress which is unable to do the easy problems. So dealing with a tough problem is going to be tremendously difficult. And so is there any reason to be other than despairing? I think there's a couple, and again, this is silver lining land. One is I think the Republicans have decided that what happened last summer was not good for them. They're taking the country to the brink. They're a little more chastened. They're a little more flexible on the idea that tax revenues, not tax rates, but tax revenues, should be allowed to rise so long as the money can be thrown into the debt. And so that's some flexibility there. But if you had to bet long term, will we do what we need to do, all these different things to get sort of a fiscal balance over the next year? I certainly would not bet on it.
Congress going to come to its senses?
Well, I don't think anybody should ever bet on that. But David said that Republicans seemed chastened. You certainly couldn't tell it from the comments of Speaker Boehner, who seems more than willing to do a replay of the disastrous, from my point of view, economically and also disastrous politically for Republicans replay of the debt ceiling showdown last time around, a year ago. And what's going to happen is all of this tax-mageddon, as we're calling it, is going, because of the timing of it, we'll probably kick the can down the road from the lame duck for maybe 6 months into the next Congress. And guess what? That is going to collide with hitting the debt ceiling yet again. So the CBO, just a quick thing on the CBO report. CBO used the R word, which is very, very scary, recession. If all of these things come to pass, they said, the economy would be in recession in the beginning of 2013.
Which is what got everybody's attention.
Which got everybody's attention. But in some ways, that wasn't really the message that CBO wanted to send, because yes, that would be a very bad outcome. But the second thing they said is that the alternative, if you filled that entire fiscal cliff and cushioned it, and you just dug the debt deeper, the debt hole that much deeper, that would also be a terrible outcome just later. And so they have been begging in their very quiet-sounding CBO language, please, members of Congress, you need to both avert the fiscal cliff now and come up with a plan that markets can understand that you really have to fill the debt hole later on. Whether Congress can manage that.
But David, Congress this year is watching the election. Not a lot is going on over the summer. So does a warning, does something like this that's said in the late spring, does it really have an effect?
Yeah, I think they're taking it seriously. I know the Republicans are. They take the debt extremely seriously. And how much they want to move is a matter of internal debate. So publicly, Ruth is absolutely right. John Boehner's laying down these stark markers. Underneath, I really don't think those stark markers exist. I think there's some room for flexibility. There's some feeling, oh, we need more revenue. Now, the question is, you got to disguise the revenue increases in a comprehensive tax reform. And the Republicans really want to do a comprehensive tax reform. They think it would allow them to secretly raise a lot of revenue, but also it would be good for the economy. It would create growth, more jobs, more tax revenues. Democrats are, and especially the Obama administration, a lot less persuaded that tax reform would be a great thing. They don't think it would produce a lot of growth. They think politically it would be extremely tough to get rid of some of these big deductions. And so it's very interesting to me to talk to people in the Obama administration and hear them being very tepid on the whole idea of comprehensive tax reform.
And meanwhile, Ruth, you've got in Europe this week, became clearer that there really are serious disagreements on what they're going to do to get out of their own debt crisis. Is there a consensus on what effect that could have here?
Yes, the consensus is bad. And the only question is how bad. In that really, in a sense, though CBO didn't talk about it in the report, that just adds to the scariness and the height of the cliff, because what happens in Europe doesn't stay in Europe. We know that the European problem just seems to be like a chronic disease now that we've been living with, and Europe doesn't seem to be getting well. And as it's not getting well, and you see questions about economic growth in China, all of that has an impact on growth here, or lack of growth.
Is there a clear effect of all this, David, on the presidential campaign, or is it just wait and see?
Potentially catastrophic. What's happened in the last couple of weeks in Europe is that a lot of Europeans have secretly decided, okay, Greece is gone. They're going to leave the Eurozone. And the question is, do they have a soft landing where Greece goes and Greece has to deal with some problems and the rest of Europe will suffer, but not cataclysmically? Or does the Greek exit precipitate a whole series of other problems which lead to a complete collapse of the euro, which would, according to one study, produce a 9% drop in European GDP, which would be cataclysmic, not only for them but for us. It would send us back into a pretty deep recession. And so I don't know if that's going to happen. Nobody knows how they're going to handle that prospect. But it could have a really negative, really negative impact.
And not that anybody's thinking about this in political terms, but it would have a very negative effect, obviously, on President Obama's re-election chances. And they are watching it very, very closely.
Their interest is in having Europe continue to kick the can down the road. Right. So Greece, they'll leave, but it'll be maybe in 2013. The problem with that is you've got popular unrest. You've got to reverse all sorts of agreements. It's more likely that Greece will go. And then that's really a problem for Obama politically.
And meantime, the debate continued. It's separate, but it's connected in a way. This debate over whether Romney's experience running this private equity firm, Bain Capital, which sometimes did big leverage buyouts of companies that cost jobs. The debate continued this week, David, over whether that's a good qualification for Mitt Romney to be president, or whether it says something kind of ugly about what goes on in capitalism.
Yeah, I sort of think this debate hurts both candidates. I think Bain is not popular. It's not well known. Most Americans don't know what Bain is, but it's not popular. The idea that he was in some sort of weird consulting group, it's not popular. And so I do think they're exploiting it for a reason. Nonetheless, I do think it hurts Obama because it makes him look like a very conventional politician. I don't think if you're a liberal Democrat, you want to be seen attacking business. People may not love business. They like it a lot better than government. They don't want to see an anti-business Democrat. And finally, I just think the Obama administration, or the campaign, has demeaned itself with a series of falsehoods. They released this ad which had a whole series of falsehoods. The one was that the steel company, GST, was a healthy company till Bain took it over, which the ad suggests completely untrue. Second, that Romney was part of throwing people out on the street when they finally did have to close this failing company. He was long gone from Bain. And then finally, that these private equity companies load debt onto businesses. There's a study that reported in my newspaper. There's no more debt, no more default in these companies than in other comparable companies. So it's this whole series of things which are untrue, which make Obama seem much more like a conventional politician.
So Romney is not hurt by this line of attack?
Well, in a sense, David's right. They're both hurt. I think one of the reasons we're talking about Bain for a second week in a row is that we had the experience on Sunday of the Obama surrogate, New York Mayor Cory Booker, who said he found it nauseating that these attacks were coming up. If I were the candidates, I would get together very quietly, and this is my modest proposal to them, just have a pact that that your surrogate's going to say something really dumb and damaging to you, my surrogate's going to say something really dumb and damaging to me. Let's pretend they don't exist.
Because it's happened on both sides.
It's happened on both sides, and here comes Donald Trump with his birtherism, about to have a big fundraiser with Mitt Romney. But the reality is that there's two Obamas when it comes to Bain. There's the Obama who gave a very nuanced, a very elegant answer when he was asked about it in a press conference this week. And then, so there's nuanced Obama, and then there's jugular Obama, who talked about, even if the ad were 100% true, who talked about Bain as a vampire.
But isn't that the way campaigns always operate, where the candidate can be sort of above the fray, and the ads can be much rougher?
One of the major questions of the Obama campaign is he campaigned in 2008 as an untraditional candidate. Now, he did plenty of negative ads and all that. Nonetheless, because he was something very different. People who were disgusted by politics could really be inspired by Obama, because it was a very different campaign. And privately, they would say, we're not going to run a Clinton-type campaign. We're not going to be conventional politicians. And so they really got a lot of independents excited. Now they're running a completely traditional campaign, literally regurgitating the exact same ad that Ted Kennedy ran against Mitt Romney. And so have they decided we've just got to win this way, or are they losing something? I think they're losing something by being so conventional.
We saw this coming a ways out, and here's why they're doing it, and here's why it's a problem for Mitt Romney as well. Is if you look at, for example, the Washington Post ABC poll that came out this week, it had Governor Romney leading the president 58-40 among whites without college degrees in terms of who would do the most, which candidate would do better to advance their family's economic interests. This is a group that President Obama is never going to win, but he has to be able to narrow that gap. He's never done well with that demographic. And this goes right at the core of the message. This man does not understand your needs, is the Obama campaign message about Romney. And that's a message that could stick.
Very, very quickly, Romney did give a speech this week on education. David, did we learn something new from that?
It was. I thought it was disappointing. In some ways, it was pretty normal Republican education positions, which was increased vouchers, increased choice, increased charter schools, and I think they're all fine. I think it was a step back from President Bush, who wanted to use the federal government to really leverage and create a lot more reform. And secondly, it was just rearranging the bureaucratic boxes. We've learned a lot about education, even the last 4 years, about the importance of quality teachers. What did Romney have to say about that? Precious little. So I thought it was stale a little.
Well, in 2 words.
Worse than stale, guts no child left behind, ends accountability for schools as a condition of federal aid. You should be much more disappointed.
Ruth Marcus, David Brooks. Have a good Memorial Day weekend.
You too, Judy. Thanks.